It's not a big secret, that the Jewish house, the Jewish home is a home divided. Really no big secret at all. The events of this week in Israel, and Palestine have only been an additional blow to the loss of unity of our people. We are indeed at great odds with each other. We are deeply divided, for sure, when it comes to Israel. Our hopes for Israel, our vision for Israel's future, what we would like Israel to be, to become. We are deeply divided here in this land, not only as Americans, but also as Jews, in the gaping chasm of our political life, left versus right. And to make matters even worse, we are deeply divided when it comes to the very practice of Judaism itself. We keep arguing, we keep bickering, we keep criticizing each other. If you are on the more liberal side of the equation, then those who oppose you would criticize you or call you names, telling that you are way too permeable with Jewish law. You have diluted the deeper meaning of what it is to live a Jewish life. You have opened the doors too widely to all who want to come, and therefore you have risked the very survival of the Jewish people by condoning interfaith marriages that only lead down the path of the next generation being raised not Jewish. And therefore you are risking the birth rates, the very birth rates of the Jewish people, and you are pushing it towards extinction. Rabbis from the more liberal side of the equation are denied the validity of the weddings they perform, of the conversions they perform. But if you are on the other side of the divide, if you are on the more orthodox side of things, you are also receiving a lot of criticism, a lot of accusations. You're accused of being stuck in the past. You are accused of bringing in Judaism that never was the way it ever was. You are accused of sticking to old forms of practice. You are accused, in fact, by being so rigid, of pushing away the Jews that might be interested in still practicing Judaism, and therefore you are risking the very survival of the Jewish people, because those Jews that are now have been rejected will move on and never find Judaism again. And therefore, the very birth rates of our people will drop, and it will lead to the extinction of Judaism altogether. Everybody is guilty of the same thing. We live in the greatest fear of them all, the fear of disappearing. So we are pointing the finger left and right at the other. And the list could go on and on and on of the ways we are opposing each other, criticizing each other, attacking each other. Everybody believing that their way, whichever denomination you belong to, that their way is the relevant way. moving forward, is the Jewish way of the 21st century. We are the ones acting with integrity, our Judaism. Now, where is this divisiveness going to lead us? What is the end of this? What does it look like? And we are so consumed with fighting the fight today that we are not able to say, okay, if we continue this way, what does this look like in just a generation, one generation from now? Let's not look 100 years from now, just one generation, 20 years from now. What does that look like? Where do we find ourselves? Now the Talmud gives us an answer to that question. Believe it or not, the sages were already thinking about it 2,000 years ago when the Talmud was first written. They're giving us an answer that is, in fact, very dark, maybe not one that we would want to follow. They're saying, as they are asking, their question at the time was, why? Why did the Second Temple, when the Jews of the time, when the Jews of the land were followers of the Torah, were practicing the mitzvot, were acting acts of loving kindness, why did God destroy the Second Temple? And their answer, in the pages of the Talmud, their answer was, because of sinat chinam, because of gratuitous hatred. God destroyed the Second Temple regardless of how pious we were, of how we followed the laws and were generous to the poor in our midst. We hated each other. Now, I'm not thinking that we have reached this point 2,000 years later. Maybe I am naive, but I don't see yet that we have reached a point where we're so fallen apart that there is no way to walk ourselves back. We may argue, we may have radically different views, perspectives, and visions, but I don't think, we are not hating each other in our hearts yet. We may be close, but I don't think we are there yet. And that gives us an opportunity, a small window perhaps of time, to do the work we need to do in order to bridge the gap so that the house of Jacob may not collapse again. And perhaps we can draw inspiration to bridge this great divide from the words of this week's Torah portion, Bamidbar, in the wilderness. Words that actually are opening the book of Numbers. Bamidbar Sinai, in the wilderness of Sinai, God spoke to Moses from within the tent of meeting, saying, take a census of the whole community. And as Moses goes about to do God's work, he begins not just to take a census of the whole community of Israel, but he also takes this opportunity to organize the tribes in preparation for the short, at this point, they still believed it was going to be short, a short wandering through the desert on their way to the promised land. It was a big feat to organize all of us into where there was cohesive so that we could actually traverse the land of the wilderness and somewhat do it in a coherent, united, unified way. So Moses not only takes a census, but he assigns each of the tribes a place in the display, in the order of our marching through the wilderness. Some tribes will be assigned to the northern part of the encampment, some part to the southern, some to the east, some to the west. And in the middle will stand the tabernacle. And in the middle will stand the tribes of the Levites and the sons of Aaron, the priests. And so each of the tribes had a place Each of the tribes knew where they belonged. It was at the same time a way to organize and order the community as it was traveling, but also it was a defense system. Because from wherever side we would be attacked, there would be a significant number of tribes that would actually cover that part of our encampment and our travels. So it was both strategic and pragmatic. And I thought that this could be a model for us. I thought that this could be a model for us to find a way back to becoming united as Moses was trying to do in that ancient wilderness. For us to realize that though there are no more tribes, there are multiple denominations. There are multiple denominations of way that Jews practice Judaism. And they could be akin to one of the tribes. And then each of the denominations, from the far right to the far left, wherever you find yourself and everything in between, has, as each tribe had, a place where to stand, where to be, where to raise their emblem in the multifaceted diamond that is Judaism. That all of us stand for something, that all of us occupy an important and fulfill an important aspect of Jewish life. That if we could bring all of us together, we could probably find a march forward when we each acknowledge that everyone has a space. It's also fitting that this is happening Bamidbar, in the wilderness, because the wilderness is that place that can hold all of us together, yet no one can claim ownership of. No one owns the desert. It's kind of this neutral place where we can come together. Because all of us are on our own journey through our own life, our own wilderness, this wild life of ours. And all of us need everyone around to feel safe, to feel secured, to feel a common purpose. The realization is that there is an array of practices. And that each of us, wherever we are in our lives, can find, sometimes in the Orthodox world, something that would work for us. Or sometimes in a Reform synagogue, something that would work for us. If we're looking to go deeply into meditation, then a Alef Meditative synagogue might work for us. Right now, in this time of our life, maybe in 10 years, 20 years from now, we'll need to find another place because our life has changed, our circumstances are changed. What we are seeking is different. All of our denominations are needed because each of them offer a unique pathway to ultimately reconnect to source. To ultimately reconnect to source. This ought to be all of our purposes. And we can only start this process if we recognize that each of us, though we own a whole truth, have only a truth that is a partial truth. Now, let me explain. Each of us, if we fully embody the kind of Judaism we aspire to embody, whatever that may be, all of us grounded in the teachings of our tradition with deep roots and a deep lineage. All of us fully believe that those practices are there to create a supportive community and are there to heal, are there to support people on their journey. All of us can strongly believe that the truth of our practice is that whole, complete truth. Yet it is also only a partial truth. It is a partial truth because it is just one piece of the entire mosaic, of the entire puzzle that is Judaism. And that we have, in fact, from that realization, a greater chance, a greater opportunity to let the pieces fit together. And that notion of owning the wholeness and knowing that that wholeness is also just a partialness, which is not an English word, is key and is key to healing. Is key to healing. Now I'll close with this. The way it says in the Torah, when God tells to Moses to take a census, the sentence is very beautiful. The Hebrew actually doesn't say take a census. It's an interpretation of the English. The way we used to count people was, per head, right? I mean, it's also an expression in English. How you count people is per head. So the expression in Hebrew is actually related to that. It says in Hebrew, as you take a census, it says to lift up their head. That's what it means. That's what it says. Because what matters is, in the census, is that Moses had to count the whole community. Because all of us matter. All of us have to be accounted for. All of us have to be counted on. All of us are part of this mosaic that is Judaism. And in the process of accounting for all of us, we lifted each other's head. We told each other, you belong here. You belong here. You proudly belong here. Your Judaism, the way you embrace it, the way you manifest it in your life. Be proud. Especially in those times where it's going to be more and more challenging to do that. Do it with great pride. I remember my grandmother of blessed memory telling me that when she walked through the streets of Paris in the 1940s, her greatest pride was when she wore the yellow star on her coat, and that she would walk through the streets of Paris, her head lifted up. We belong